Leslie Skardon is a mom, a wife, and a nonprofit CEO who now wants to become the next councilwoman to represent the city of Charleston's District 12 on City Council. I speak exclusively with her for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Leslie Skardon, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you.
I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, I've known you and your husband for many years now. I've gotten to know you all for a couple of years now. And of course, you made news over the summer because obviously you announced your candidacy for Charleston City Council's District 12 seat, which covers parts of Central and Southern James Island. And everybody also knows that you are a nonprofit CEO and a businesswoman. So what got you from being a nonprofit CEO to now a candidate for City Council?
Well, thank you for having me, Quintin. These are always great experiences, so really appreciate you doing this. The reason why I'm running is because I believe in service. I've spent my career figuring out how do we improve our community and our state and our country, and how do we make the world a little bit better. So that's a core family value and belief, and I view City Council as a really amazing way to be of service. This is not a glamorous job, right? This is about potholes and sidewalks and drainage ditches and traffic and infrastructure and parks. But they're those really key things that are so important to our quality of life and to making our community as best as it can be. So I have a long service in the community, a track record of service. And so I hope to bring that to City Council.
I want to get to those particular issues in just a second, but what is the state of quality of life on James Island?
You know, it's amazing. So I've been door knocking for over a month now. And when I go to doors and I introduce myself and I talk about the race and I say the three key issues here are infrastructure, traffic, flooding, and quality of life. And everyone nods and I say, you know, what are the issues that you see in the city and the neighborhood? And they say, we love our quality of life, right? We love our neighborhood. So there's this deep passion for James Island. People really enjoy the beauty here, the green space we have, but they're negatively impacted by traffic and by potholes and by flooding. And so I would say people love James Island, but there are things that need to get done and things that need to be improved.
Let me just jump right into it. Recently, the City of Charleston's Committee on Real Estate voted unanimously to deny an annexation and rezoning to PUD of 2.4 acres on James Island. The plan was for 38 townhomes, which would be located on a dangerous curve, according to some people, on Foley Road. When you think about that, unanimously denied an annexation and rezoning, how should the rezoning look for that particular annexation?
Yeah, so I submitted comments on that as well, saying that we need to be against irresponsible development, right? So if there's reckless development, we do not want that on James Island. And when I say irresponsible development, what I mean is we should not be building in flood zones, right? We do not need to cut down a single tree on James Island. We should not be filling in wetlands or marshes, right? When we think about protecting James Island now and in the future, we cannot be building in flood zones, right? So first and foremost, we need to keep that space green and beautiful. The second thing is that if there is going to be development, redevelopment, right? Looking at areas that might have been abandoned or need to be fixed up, especially in that commercial corridor identified in the Rethink Folly Road plan, where
Right.
that is slated for some of those redevelopments, it must include livability, right? So we cannot be building things that do not have bike ped access, do not improve our public transportation, that aren't connecting communities and businesses so that we can improve that quality of life going forward.
What exactly is your connectivity plan for Foley Road?
So we need to get back to that Rethink Folly Road plan, right? That was passed in 2016. It's part of the City of Charleston's master plan that was passed in 2021. And I think it's really languished. And we need a councilwoman who is going to stand up for that plan and be there in those meetings and really be an efficient and effective voice for James Island, right? Sidewalks are so basic, but they are so important, not only so we can walk and see our neighbors and support small businesses, but it's also a safety issue, right? So we've seen so many fatalities and collisions across the city. And so we have to make sure that when we're thinking about connectivity, there are sidewalks so we can walk safely, so we can bike safely. So we're looking at that Route 31 and making sure that those bus stations are safe for people. I know that's a big focus of yours, Quintin, and you've talked a lot about that. So that connectivity and that bike pedestrian access and public transportation has to be key. And the other part, it's not just about safety, it also gets cars off the road. So it helps reduce our traffic as well.
Well, how many cars could actually be taken off the road by this plan?
That is a great question. So when I was looking at the Rethink Folly Road plan, it says that we have 70,000 cars who use Folly Road a day. That is a ton of traffic, right? So we need to not only be thinking of ways to move people between their communities and get them off their cars, but also think about our school transit system. I was sitting in the intergovernmental meeting at the town of James Island at Town Hall last month, and we were talking about the traffic at Camp Road Middle School. How do you fix those backups, right? So I think we really need to be looking at our school buses as well and thinking of ways to get those cars off the road.
What areas on James Island can you actually move those school buses to alleviate this particular traffic?
Yeah, well, so I think it's a big part of this is getting people to use school buses, right? And one of the safety concerns that was raised, which I think makes a lot of sense, is that at rush hour, when people are going to pick up at Camp Middle School, the road is blocked, and that's a public safety issue, right? Bishop Gadsden is right down there. So how do you get ambulances to and from these situations? So I've spoken to folks at the school district, and I know that they're looking at a plan to put potentially a sidewalk between Walgreens and Camp Middle. But that's some of the thinking that needs to be looked at, right? We need a leader who is going to bring all parties together, who's going to work across jurisdictions, which is a really, really big deal, especially on James Island, given the number of municipalities that we have, and who's going to work with experts at the staff level to make sure that we're looking at public safety, connectivity, and those transportation needs.
When you go back, obviously, to that particular location on James Island, should their emergency lane zone be built right near that school?
Should there be an emergency lane built? I think we need to look at all options, right, to make sure that we can move people safely between our schools, especially, and also access public services. So making sure that our fire trucks and our police officers are supported and have what they need, absolutely.
What do they need right now?
That's a great question. I really prioritize the team, right? So when we're thinking about the staff, the amazing service folks who serve the city, who serve James Island, our police officers, our firefighters, I mean, they do incredible work. Our garbage people, right? Our recycling folks, they do amazing work that is so critical for a town, for a community, for a city. And so I would be very supportive of making sure that the city has competitive wages, that these folks can live where they work, and that they know that the services they provide are absolutely critical to our daily lives and our safety. So they need to be supported.
How would you compare the city's wages to, say, Charlotte, North Carolina?
It's a great question. And I know that Charleston benchmarks to cities like Charlotte, to Raleigh, and other places. Salt Lake City is one of our peer cities. We have an affordability crisis in Charleston, right? People cannot afford to live where they work. And that's a huge issue, not only for those amazing service people who we just talked about, but also our teachers, right? And so how are we going to help people live where they work? Again, that translates directly to traffic as well. Because if you have people commuting 2 hours a day, that's a lot of cars on the road. So I would say that we really need to focus on this affordability issue and making sure that we have that missing middle housing and that attainable housing here in Charleston.
Well, let me ask you this, then, Leslie. What's more important for District 12? Is it building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, and better utilizing those existing homes?
Well, Quintin, I would say that we, again, need to be against irresponsible development. And so when I say that, let's look at land that has already been built. We should not be cutting down trees. We should not be filling in those marshes. We need to keep those green areas pristine and beautiful and not expand or sprawl out, right? When we think about redevelopment of places, that's taking something that maybe isn't being utilized right now and putting in great services for communities. So we are over on Fort Johnson Road in the Harborview Shopping Center over there. They have an amazing local coffee shop. There's an amazing local bottle shop. These are places where we walk with our 3.5-year-old twin boys and our dog too, right? We see our neighbors there. So we need to be thinking about ways to revitalize our local community and support those local businesses to enhance that family life.
And I know that area very well. I happened to work there for my previous employer, and now they have ripe juice bar over there as well. But how many small businesses do they actually need in that part of on James Island right now?
You know, we just had another local small business open at the roundabout down at Harborview Road in Fort Johnson, that
Right.
cafe. And it's fantastic. We took our boys there the other morning. We were able to have coffee and donuts, and then we were able to walk across the street to the playground there, right? So those are examples of, I think, why people love James Island. So we can see our neighbors there. We can say hello. Our kids can have places to be. Now, Quintin, what was missing was a safe crosswalk across Harborview Road to get there. And what was missing is a full sidewalk down Fort Johnson so we can get home safely, right? We don't have that. So we actually had to drive. So we had to get in our car and we had to drive the 2 miles down to the local business before we could play with our kids. And so those are basic things that our community needs. And again, we need an effective leader who can deliver that to really improve our quality of life.
Well, let me just ask you bluntly, then, how many sidewalks do you actually need in District 12?
That is a great idea. Many more, right? So just where we live on Fort Johnson, that sidewalk is broken up. The
Oh,
Secessionville sidewalks, we need sidewalks there. Solid Green needs a sidewalk. Think about Riverland Road and
sure.
Camp. There's some progress, but not enough. Think of Woodland Shores. That's not in the James Island 12th
Right.
district, but we need more infrastructure, and it's a safety issue, as we said, right? So without these sidewalks, without safe places to put our families and bikers and commuters, it's a big issue. So there's a huge need.
Do you need more roundabouts versus sidewalks?
Both, yes.
Hmm.
So as I'm sure you saw, the county finally approved a plan to put in a roundabout at Camp in Fort Johnson. It's a good start. Want to see it built. They also approved traffic lanes at Secessionville and Fort Johnson. I think that should be a roundabout. Roundabouts are incredible ways to move traffic. I'm sure you've seen the impact of having the roundabout at Camp and Riverland. That has helped traffic and the flow of cars immensely, and they were able to build some sidewalks around that. So I think roundabouts are a huge boom. I think they're very good, and it's a helpful traffic measure. And we need to make sure that we have a councilwoman who's going to advocate for traffic measures like that for James Island and get the resources we need on James Island to do that.
Whatever resources do you need to make this a reality?
A lot of money. So the traffic roundabout and the lanes on Secessionville and at Camp were $11.7 million. So funding continues to be a huge issue. And so when we're thinking about how we fund these projects, the city can't do it by itself, right? And as I'm sure you're familiar with, the state actually owns Fort Johnson Road. The
Right.
state owns Folly Road. So
Sure.
we have to take a layered funding approach that's using money from the city, the county, the state, the feds to make sure that we can improve these projects. And again, especially on James Island, where we also have the town and the PSD and the unincorporated county and the city, that layered approach to funding is going to be really important.
So where do you start?
Well, we got to start locally, right? So that intergovernmental meeting on James Island, those are quarterly. We got to prioritize those and make sure that all of those entities on James Island are aligned on our needs. The county does have some great plans in place. There's a good infrastructure PowerPoint that they gave to the at the meeting in July. It's online as well, where you can see some of the projects that they have. But we need to make sure that we have someone who is following up, who's talking with staff, who's talking with other council members too, to show why these projects are so important and why they need those funding allocations.
Okay, you talk about those funding allegations, obviously those projects. Which projects should be the priority right now?
Those Fort Johnson projects got to happen. I'm glad to see that the funding passed, but let's see it when they start, right? The Secessionville sidewalk continuation, really important, right? Along Grimble Road, I mean, the military road. Think about all these places where when you drive by 3 days after it's rained, those ditches are still full, right? And people get in accidents over there. I was talking to a gentleman who lives on Secessionville the other day. We were sitting down in his driveway with his mom, and he was showing me the curve where cars just go into the ditch and where he's scared sick that his kid's going to get hit going to the mailbox to get the mail because there isn't a sidewalk there. So there are a lot of different areas across the district that need to be prioritized, and the county has a good list to start. But again, we need someone who has experience working with government, who knows how to get things done and can really prioritize those projects on James Island.
You talk about the county's priorities, but where are the city's priorities on this?
Quintin, that's a great question. That's one of the reasons why I'm running, right? We need someone who is going to say, these are the really important issues in District 12. And how we do that is we need to make sure we have those relationships, not only with those different entities on James Island, but also with City Council, right? So we need to make sure that the other 11 council people understand James Island, understand the pressure points. I think that, Ross Appel, who has part of James Island, and Jim McBride, who has parts of James Island, they do a really great job, right? And so we need to make sure that this is a one James Island team where we're talking about the issues that affect our citizens and our neighbors every day.
And I hope we get Ross Appel back on Quintin's Close-Up soon so we can talk about these similar issues in the next interview. And I'm pretty sure you know this too, Leslie, but the Post-Corey recently, just on Sunday, published an editorial supporting high-density housing for the Charleston area. Where could that ideally be on James Island?
And James Island, that's a great question. So I've been reading up on the mayor's plan of his 3,500 attainable housing units. I know he's looked at the West Edge area and Morrison Drive. So we got to put housing where workers are, right? And so the peninsula, I think, is one of the highest need areas because of the incredible hospitality workers that we have down there. The hospital system is a top employer in the city, MUSC, Roper, then the college, right? And of course, our tourism industry is booming. So I am absolutely supportive of working with the mayor and with council to figure out where the best places are for that missing middle housing, because without it, people can't afford to live here. And that means that prices go up and we don't have the staff that we need.
Well, what is the typical price for middle housing here in the Low Country?
So I looked this up on James Island. The median house is about $630,000. That's crazy. That is too high. My husband and I cannot afford to move, right? We bought this house during COVID. We have a low interest rate, thank goodness, but we're one of the lucky ones. And we can't move anytime soon. It's just too expensive. So we have to look at affordability as part of any solutions.
You talk about those solutions. What else do you need as far as housing on James Island? You mentioned teachers earlier. Is it workforce housing or is it really attainable housing?
I know there are a lot of different definitions that we could say: attainable, affordable, workforce, missing middle. Bottom line is, if you are a teacher in Charleston County and you teach at James Island Charter or Stiles Point, where our boys are going to go, or Camp Middle, where we're zoned for, you got to be able to afford to live there, right? How else are you going to understand the community, see those students, have those relationships? It's something we absolutely have to work on. And I think one of the great things that I will bring to council is I'm a collaborative leader by nature. My day job is to bring together the biggest businesses in the state with nonprofits, state agencies, utilities, small businesses, and get them all to sit down at the table and talk about how we get more clean energy, how we conserve more land, how we look at our workforce, how we reduce our waste. That type of collaborative mindset of using expertise from across sectors is vital for council, right? There are other states and cities that are doing this really well. And so we need to be able to look at all those solutions and hear from the experts to make those decisions.
How do you view the workforce on James Island?
So in terms of workforce on James Island, we have a lot of families, right? The median age is 41, and about 60% of those folks are working. So we have working families, we have young families, we have retired folks as well. And I think that's part of what makes James Island so rich culturally, is that we have this diversity. But we need to make sure that we have ways to get to work safely, right? They could walk to work, bike to work would be great. If they could take a bus to work, that would be even better. Although we know that there are a lot of issues with that Route 31. And we need to make sure that when it rains, they can get out of their driveway and they can get out of their neighborhood, right? Those are all basic economic issues.
So what exactly are the issues with Carter and Route 31?
So I was talking to a couple people about this. It takes 90 minutes to go through Route 31. 90 minutes. It's not a reliable way to get to and from a job, right? So if you miss a bus by 5 minutes, you gotta wait 90 minutes. So we need to look at, adding potentially another bus, which I think has helped somewhat. Now there are 2 buses that go around, but it's still an issue. The other issue is just the layout of James Island. So bus systems work really well when you have a grid and James Island is not a grid by any means. And so I think some of the solutions are, one, making folks be able to wait in a safe place, right? So actually having a bus stop that's covered and off the road with sidewalks. I know that the express that leaves from Walmart has been successful getting down, especially to MUSC. But unfortunately, that only runs during commuter hours in the morning and at night. So I think looking at that express option could be a good thing. But we need to make sure that James Island has a voice in CARTA, and that we're thinking about ways to be able to move people on and off the island safely.
Have you talked to Mike Seekins yet?
Councilman Seekings is great, and so I would look forward to working with him if elected.
How are you working with him now on Route 31?
Oh, we're not working together right now on Route 31.
Should you talk to him about that?
I'm happy to. Yeah, absolutely. He's a great councilman.
Now, speaking of Seekings, let's go back to City Council because obviously, as you know, we were just notified of Mayor Cogswell's plan for affordable units in Charleston to be built on the peninsula, West Ashley, and Johns Island. Unfortunately, according to the article, James Island's not mentioned. Why?
It's a great question. People here don't like development, right? They so much of the land that I think is open needs to be preserved. And so again, as you're thinking about the Rethink Folly Road plan and that neighborhood zone, just going back to your second question, right, about the PUD that was denied and the annexation that was denied, a lot of that land shouldn't be built on. And so that I think creates some constraints. Now, if we want to look along Folly, along the commercial zone that was identified in the Rethink Folly Road plan, and look at ways to use that space in a better way where there could be mixed use, I'm definitely open to that.
Where could you ideally put mixed use right now on James Island?
I think we got to look at that commercial zone on Folly and land that's been developed. Some of those strip malls, they're not the prettiest thing in the world. Folly Road is not the crown jewel of James Island when it comes to the traffic and some of the appearances there. And so I would be open to talking with anyone, business owners, folks who are out there, the people, of course, in any neighborhoods, to see, how we can find a solution that works for everybody.
Well, a better question is this. Why isn't Folly Road the crown jewel of James Island?
It's because we need effective leadership, Quintin. We need someone who's going to prioritize it, who's going to be able to move the needle forward and look at that Rethink Folly Road plan. There are a lot of issues, right? So easements are a big one. Who owns what?
Right.
Which municipality has control of what? So, I think people are sick and tired of sitting on Folly Road in traffic. And it's not even just during rush hour. It's during the middle of the day, right? It's 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. There's traffic on Folly. And it's not a pretty road. And it's not a safe road, right? I don't go to specific businesses if I know I have to turn left, right? I will only go places if I'm on my way out of town or back into James Island because it's just not safe, right? Where our kids used to be in school, we were forced to go basically a different way because it was dangerous to turn left on Folly Road. So I think that people feel unsafe. I think they're fed up of sitting in traffic. And so that's really why we need someone who I think has a track record of service in our community and leadership in our community to reprioritize those projects and make Folly Road much, much better.
How could you make it better? With more green space?
Absolutely. That's part of the solution laid out in the plan. So I think that the Chase Bank on the corner of Camp and Folly, they followed that Rethink Folly Road plan where they were able to set it back. They were able to add in some sidewalks, add in some green space, right? So as any property is redeveloped along Folly, we have to add in those sidewalks, add in that buffer. There's a lot that we can do with green infrastructure that not only helps reduce flooding, but also improves the road and enhances that quality of life and creates more opportunities for people to enjoy James Island.
And I know things are tight and you really can't really redevelop as much as you would like to because it is Folly Road and it's really developed. But what other properties along Folly Road can you redevelop right now?
That's a great question. And that's where, we need to look at what property owners want to do as well, right? So we have to respect property owners' rights and what's currently there in the zoning. But I mean, I really think of this as an economic issue as well. So if you have someone who owns a business that's not getting, that's on the edge, that doesn't have a lot of income right now, how can we get people to that business more safely? How do we help increase their revenues? So I think it's looking at every solution. It's talking to the property owners. It's being extremely collaborative, right? Also making sure that nothing negatively impacts the neighborhoods around it. I mean, when you've seen time and time again where anywhere across the city, across the county, a new development comes in and it's built up and the neighbors around it get washed away. That's not okay. We can't have that in any way, shape, or form. So it has to be a collaborative approach. And I think it's something that can really help our local economy and businesses thrive.
Please don't call me crazy, but let me ask you, is vertical growth ideal for James Island?
That's a great question. We have to talk about density as a solution, right? So we talked about the beautiful neighborhood overlay zone up by Grimble and Saul agree, right? That we want to keep beautiful and keep preserved and make sure that we're using those wetlands and those marshes to help us with flood mitigation, right? We haven't talked a ton about flooding yet, but that's a huge, huge problem. And so when we're thinking about closer in, we got to think about density. It's a common sense solution to a lot of different issues.
What should be tweaked when it comes to this plan? Is anything should be updated right now with the flood mitigation plan?
With the basin strategy,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so I'm so excited we were talking about this because flooding and resilience is a personal and professional passion of mine. So when we think about water in Charleston, we have a lot of different issues, right? We have tidal flooding, we have storm surge, we have rain bombs. So we need to be looking at stormwater management through all those different lenses. So as I talk to folks about flooding, I think there are two different approaches. There's the short-term approach, which focuses on clearing our drains and our ditches. There were drains that were built 40 or 50 years ago that had not been cleaned or maintained. That is a huge issue, right? Those are the basics. Let's get the funding we need. Let's get the resources we need. Let's have an effective councilwoman who will advocate for those areas to clean those ditches and drains and make sure that those culverts can flow as well. Then there's also the longer term approach, right? And I think that the Charleston Water Plan and the basin strategy does a good job of outlining those projects. So we have 3 different water basins on James Island and 46 different projects identified. 46 projects, Quintin. That's a lot, right? And they're from everything from raising roads like Harborview Road. When you're driving down Harborview and there's a king tide, I mean, you're close to the water, right? And then there's also the Battalion Drive and Battery Point out there. I drove by there the other day at a high tide just to check it out and understand it. The water's almost at the road, right? So we need to be looking at those projects that are going to raise the roads, but then also neighborhood by neighborhood projects as well. So we have a great plan, and now we need a leader who is going to prioritize it and be an advocate for James Island to implement it.
So if you raise those roads, how much would that cost the average taxpayer on James Island?
Well, hopefully nothing, right? Because it needs to be part of our existing funding. And I am in favor of reauthorizing the half-cent sales tax next year. That has to happen, right? We have to continue to have funding sources that are going to help us pay for these projects. But that is also where we need help from the county and the state and the federal government, because the city cannot do it alone and the town cannot do it alone. It has to be a comprehensive approach. And it's what we owe the citizens. It's why we pay taxes, is to make sure that we have government looking out for us in those areas. And so we need to show that local government can do its job.
Now, you have obviously went around talking to a lot of people in District 12 on James Island. Are they in favor of this referendum? Are they against it?
It's a great question. I know it failed last time around, and that was, I think, very specifically because of 526. It's passed previously, so I think that as long as the county is clear about what's in it, I think it absolutely should pass. It's a continuation of something that we already have.
Is there something that they need to tweak to make certain that this actually passes this time?
Well, I think the 526 language won't be in there. So I think 526 is that's been settled. And so we just need to move forward and focus on getting the funding we need for all of these projects that we've been talking about.
So what is the total cost for all of these projects in your district?
Millions. millions and millions of dollars, right? It's a hefty number. And unfortunately, the price just keeps going up because they're delayed, right? Project after project keeps getting delayed. I know you've been on top of the Fishburne Drainage project. The more we delay things and the more that we wait, the more expensive it gets. And so I think people are tired of hearing that things are going to get fixed or things are going to get different. And then 4 years passes and nothing's been done. They've heard zero updates or information on it. And that's part of the reason of why I'm running, is to get stuff done, right? Like we're not working this hard and spending this much time on this to sit up there and just talk. We got to have action. And so that's what I plan to do.
You talk about obviously the funding. Obviously the delays are causing a lot of costs to go up in regards to these particular projects. But is it inflation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge driver of it. So inflation increases the costs. Materials get more expensive. Labor gets more expensive. So that's why we need to act now.
Back now, I have 8 minutes left, and I hope I can get some more questions in if I can. I know I'm running behind. I got to go run off to work. But a few years ago, the town of James Island modified the Folly Road overlay district to prohibit any hotels or motels in the town of James Island on Folly Road. However, the city is planning to allow a small inn to be built near Battery Island Drive and Folly Road. Is that ideal right now?
That's a great question. Again, I would go back to these principles about being against irresponsible development. We cannot have reckless development. So we should not be filling in marshes. We should not be cutting down trees to build more. We just can't do it. And it's not smart and it's not safe in the long run, right? If you're filling in a flood zone to build something, guess what? That's not only going to flood in 5 years, it's going to flood in 30 years. And so part of our job on council, hopefully, is to not just think about the short term, but also the long term. I want our kids to be able to come back and visit us on James Island with their kids in 30 years. And so what that means is that we really, really need to be thinking about our water and looking at that water plan and making sure that when the next hurricane comes, knock on wood, I mean, we have to be prepared. We have to be ready, and we have to know where buildings are going to go so that people are going to be safe.
This might be a redundant question, Leslie, but is density really sensible on low-lying sea islands that flood regularly, such as James Island?
Well, so that's a great question, and I know that the Rethink Folly plan actually recommends against density in some of the different areas, right? Because they don't want the flooding to get worse. And so I think going back to the plans that we have, the 2021 Charleston Master Plan, I was reading through it last night. It's 88 pages. I was reading through it. We have to be aware of those things. So the thing is, Quintin, is that there's been great research done. There's great data out there. There are great plans in place. There's been extensive public cooperation and public meetings. And now we need someone who's going to get it done, right? We need someone who isn't just going to sit and talk, but who's going to take action and make sure that James Island has a voice and that we're thinking about our infrastructure and our flooding and delivering for James Island. And that's what I plan to do.
And there are obviously rumors that someday the city would like to build single residential homes on the city battlefields on Fort Johnson Road and also behind the Food Line Center off of Riverland Drive. How many of those should be built if they do build?
I'm so glad you brought up these cemeteries and these really amazing cultural areas, Quintin, because we have such amazing history, especially on the Sea Islands, right? And we have to preserve that history and we have to tell that history. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud that I was able to actually create an education program for students to explore and understand our history across the county. Those areas are treasures, and we've had so much gentrification that we have pushed out the people who have lived here for over a century, and we're not telling those stories. And so that is really, really important. And I will work with the residents of James Island, especially in those traditionally Black communities, Westchester and Ferguson and Soligree, to make sure that we're preserving that history and telling that history and honoring it.
So if you do get on council, let's say for instance this comes up, would you vote for it or vote against it?
Well, this specific one, I would say we need to apply those principles of preservation, right? So we can't be just putting things over historically significant sites without understanding what's there, understanding what the community wants, and telling those stories. So we need to be really, really thoughtful about that. And I think that downtown, the process that they're going through with the college and the graveyard site that was found
Right
is
here.
a good process. Yeah, right. They're getting a lot of community input. They're listening to folks. They're laying out the plan. And so any building that touches these historically significant sites must follow a very, very collaborative plan and ensure that we're preserving and sharing that history.
So comes back obviously to Fort Johnson Road and of course Riverland Drive with those single family residential homes that they're proposing, would you, as far as that vote, kick it back to the history committee first before voting on it?
Um, yes. So I'm not as familiar with those specific ones, but I would say a general rule of thumb for a process like this is that if it is within the current zoning, but we find something of historical significance, we have to pause, right? And we have to look at it and we have to be collaborative and we have to talk to the community because too often our history isn't being told and it's being paved over, literally.
And you talk about obviously, the history and things being paved over. I know recently the city approved the designs for a four-story apartment building to be built in the last green space left in the Maybank Gathering Place on Maybank Highway and Promenade Lane on James Island. This apartment complex will put the total number of units to over 800 units right there near the intersection that ranks an F according to some people at Maybank and Foley Road at the Wapoo Cut. When it comes to that particular project, Leslie, where is the unlimited density limits and what should be the actual requirements for this project?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example, Quentin. We're building and not thinking about the infrastructure. That intersection is horrific, right? Maybank and Folly Road. Think of how often people get stuck trying to turn right. They're going to Johns Island, they're going to James Island. We can't be building without the infrastructure there to support not only our current needs but our future needs. And our current infrastructure does not support our current needs. Those are really dangerous places. Maybank Highway is so dangerous. And there are talks to put in plans, there are talks to put in sidewalks, there are talks to put in crosswalks. But let's see it. We gotta build the infrastructure first. We gotta make sure that our current folks are safe. And then we gotta do some thoughtful planning around it. But I think that people don't feel safe on that road. I know I don't feel safe driving on that road. It's not safe to cross that road. We've had too many people die on that road. And so we need to get infrastructure in place that makes those roads safe and can handle our current traffic now and think about the future as well.
But going down the street here to MUSC, I'm like literally blocks away from there. But should the city consider, for lack of a better word, emulating that overlay plan and use it for this particular plan?
It's a great question. I know that the MUSC overlay has been in the paper quite a bit, and I know that they've slowed down the process to get more community input. There is definitely a need to make government more effective and efficient, right? We need to make sure that government can work. We also need to balance the amazing history that makes Charleston so unique. And so I think slowing it down, making sure that all voices are heard, and finding a way to balance the economic needs of the city, the health needs of our people here, and also that really special culture is the right approach.
Leslie Skardon, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quentin. It was great to see you. I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Oh, of course, I'll be here.